Here we are on the dawn of a new year, getting ready to welcome in 2026. Who's ready for it? Some ready for it, some look not. Some are ready to get 2025 over with. If it's been a hard year for any of you. And then we look forward to the changes that the new year brings. The main thing I see is that the gym's always full of people that make goals. Well, whether you're into goals and resolutions or not, it's a good time to reflect. I was thinking of the words in the Bible of Haggai. We did a series on that recently where several times the Lord says to them, consider your ways. And then again, repeated throughout the book as the Lord gives a series of messages to them. Consider your ways. And the message of that book, they had not been doing what the Lord wanted them to do. And so the Lord gave them a message of correction and a mission to start rebuilding the temple. And during that period of the Old Testament, a lot of time the Lord gave them warnings and messages and would get ignored. But this time, the people came together and rallied and did exactly what he asked. But it's a time for us to consider our ways. A time of reflection in our lives of this last year. What's working? What's not working so well? Where do I have room for improvement? And we don't have to do that on the new year, but the Bible tells us that we have to do that sometimes. We should be doing it often. In fact, we should be doing it more than once a year to see where our life needs correction and asking God, Lord, what do you want me to be doing better? What needs to be fixed in my life as I seek to become more and more Christ-like? One thing to reflect on today, our verse today is Proverbs 22, verse 1. It says, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Now, what's this talking about a good name? You have two names that people usually know you by. Your first name, that's who you are as an individual, your individual self, and then your last name is your family name, family of belonging. And I believe the Proverbs is talking about both. Having a good first name and a good last name. Now, what does it mean to have a good name? Well, it's talking about your reputation. It's talking about honor. If you look up the definition of honor, it basically says your reputation. One dictionary said having a good name or having a good reputation. And so here in Proverbs, it's telling us that we should care about our reputation. We should care about our name. A good name is more desirable than great riches. There's a Japanese proverb that says, the reputation of 1,000 years may be determined by the conduct of 1 hour. Or in our lifetimes, we could spend our lives building our reputation, doing the right thing, and You can destroy your reputation in a matter of minutes. A lot of people out there sitting behind bars because they didn't do the right thing one time. Maybe they lost their temper and destroyed their lives in an instant. It was Merriam-Webster's dictionary that defines honor as a good name or public esteem. So this verse is talking about both. It's talking about our honor. Honor is not something that we hear about and talk about too terribly often. I think some cultures have a stronger sense of honor than we're used to, particularly Asian cultures. People who study culture call it cultures of honor and cultures of shame, or cultures of honor and shame. It's where you really care about your reputation, and if you mess up in some way or fail to do the right thing, there's a sense of real public embarrassment and bringing shame upon your family. Embarrassment to your family, something that can last a very, very long time. Something that's really hard to take years and years to dig your way out of it when you've made a mistake or embarrassed yourself or embarrassed your family. No, there's good and bad to that. I find here in the United States, people just seem to be like, yeah, so what, I made a mistake. All of us have, that was last year. No big deal anymore, right? And in a sense, that comes with a sense of freedom, but then again, people, when you take honor casually, a lot of the time people don't care about it and just figure they could not act right and people will get over it. And so in a lot of ways, it makes that there's no accountability out there for when we don't treat people right, when we don't act right, and when we choose to do the wrong thing. Now it says a good name is more desirable than great riches. It says to be esteemed better than silver and gold. One thing it brings to mind is the literal sense of that. What do I mean by a literal sense of your honor, your good name, your reputation, literally being like silver or gold or money and affecting your riches, or credit scores? You ever think about that? Your FICO score, your Fair Isaac score. If you don't know what a credit score is, I'm assuming most of the adults are pretty familiar with what it is and how it works. Whenever you borrow money, banks, mortgage lenders, credit cards, you borrow money when you charge something on a credit card. So whenever you borrow money, tab is kept on how well you pay it back, if you pay it back as agreed upon. So when you borrow money, you often sign an agreement or a promissory note of the terms of repayment. So it's how well do you honor those terms of repayment and paying it back? Do you pay it back on time every month, as it's usually a monthly payment? And now, more than just lenders do it, a lot of larger landlords, like apartment buildings, will do this as well, that they'll report every payment, whether you paid on time or whether you missed a payment. So one of the hard things when you're a young adult trying to take out a car loan or buy a house, sometimes you might have a low score just because of an insufficient length of credit history. You haven't been at it long enough. Where the bank underwriting, the lender underwriting, the landlord, the property manager, they want to see that you have a history established of having paid on time according to past agreements. And then that's where you get a good score. And if you miss payments, you pay your rent late, you pay your credit card bill late, you pay your car payment late, you break the agreement, and your score drops. So if you have a low credit score, then nobody wants to loan you money. It's logical though. Why would anybody loan you money if you don't honor your agreements and if you've not repaid other people when you've agreed to repay them, then what is the likelihood that you'll pay back this new lender in a timely manner? So it's a risk factor, as they want to make safe investments and don't want to lend to people that have broken their agreement. Now, sometimes it's not a person's fault if they've had a steady sense of income and they lose it through no fault of their own. Health problems sometimes can cause these things, or layoffs. Yet they look at a big picture, so sometimes having a good credit score could save you a lot of money if you get the best interest rates out there. So in a way, we still do look at that aspect of reputation, and it affects us monetarily. For instance, if you buy a car or buy a house, if you're charged double the interest rate because you have a poor history, you could end up paying thousands and thousands more over the life of the loan. So in a way, good name, good reputation on your credit score sometimes is literally better than gold or silver, literally better than having more money, having a solid reputation. So monetarily, your reputation's valuable, but before God, it matters even more. The Bible tells us that God knows everything about us. He's always watching. It's like the all-seeing eye that you have on the dollar bill that sees everything you do. Hebrews chapter 4 tells us that God's always watching and that he knows all of our thoughts and all of our deeds, going on to say that nothing is hidden from his sight. One thing with honor and a good name, I think it matters the most when you have a moral choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and nobody's going to know. But guess what? God is watching. God knows. You can't pull anything past him. There's nowhere you can hide. God is everywhere all the time. And you can't hide. You can hide from everybody else. You can fool everybody else, but you can't fool God, and you can't hide from God. He's always watching, and he is reading your mind at all times as well. Now, some of us are getting a little uncomfortable when we hear that and we read that, as maybe none of us always think the nicest thoughts all the time. So God's always watching. God knows, and our reputation matters before him because the Bible tells us over and over in so many different ways. Do the right thing. Do the right thing all the time. God's watching. Tells us a lot of things. It tells us that nothing is worth ruining our name and our reputation for. Just like the lenders keep score, our credit score, God's also watching us. watching what we're doing, throwing tests our way to see, are we going to act with honor or are we going to dishonor ourselves? We have opportunities to act honorably or to dishonor ourselves just about every single day, multiple times through day. A good name's more desirable than great riches. Well, no. If we could reword this, it's basically saying that no amount of money or prestige is worth ruining your integrity by doing something dishonorable. Proverbs, a lot of Proverbs sort of restate this or reword this in order to make a point. I think when the Bible repeats itself, it's intentional because God caused it to be in there because he wants us to get the point. You know, you say it once, you read it once, it's easy to miss it or misunderstand it. But here it's reworded. Proverbs 28 verse 6. Better a poor man whose walk is blameless than a rich man whose ways are perverse. Now, what does that mean? It's better to be honest and poor than rich and corrupt. Better to do the right thing even if it costs you, even if there are consequences to it, than to be rich and corrupt. Proverbs 21, that's the same chapter as the verse we're examining today. To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. And think about the context here of the time it was written, when they're living under the Mosaic law of the Old Covenant, where sacrifice was a big deal. Sacrifice was how you get your sins forgiven. Sacrifice is how you honor and worship the Lord, of going to the temple and making a sacrifice, bringing him something. It was very central to Jewish life of worship. But it says doing what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice, than what we can give him. So this is saying that the Lord values that we do the right thing and that we act with honor. Now, for the believer, honor is supposed to be a really important thing, the way we live for the Lord, the way we honor him. Proverbs 11:1. The Lord abhors dishonest scales, but accurate weights are his delight. What's that talking about, dishonest scales? Well, it used to be when you would go to the market, they would have weights there to weigh what you buy. We still do this. You go to Safeway or Walmart, you buy meat, you pay by the pound. You buy apples or oranges or broccoli, you pay by the pound. But it was in the ancient world when it was less supermarkets and more like farmers markets. People were known to be able to get more money by having a rigged scale. So, maybe you would add 20% to the weight so that people would pay more than the customary price or the advertised price. So it was just a common way to get ahead and rip people off. But it's saying that the Lord abhors that. It's like saying when you go to Walmart, weigh your oranges right. If you sell oranges, don't have bad weights for the scale in order to trick people. Why? Because the Lord abhors it. Why? Because All these verses are saying it matters most what God thinks for how we act. If we're going to have honor, if we're going to honor our agreements, if we're going to do what God asks of us, if we're going to do the right thing. Now, our Sunday school hour, we finished going through many chapters, one chapter a week of 1 Samuel, and now we're well underway in 2 Samuel. And the majority of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel are about the life of David, King David. And it went on for many, many chapters, a period of many years in the Bible where David's been anointed king and the Lord's promised him he'll become king of Israel, yet many years go by. Well, Saul still sits on the throne, and Saul's persecuting David. And David has a couple chances to kill Saul when Saul's hunting him. If he had, I don't think we'd think less of him. Would have seemed like self-defense. Yet, he cared about doing things the right way. And it came at a great cost to him. It cost many more years of hardship because, well, Saul kept persecuting him. But one thing the man after God's own heart that we're learning is he cared about doing things the right way, even when it wasn't the easy way. It was the right way. And what made it the right way? Because he wanted to honor God in his choices, just as we want to honor God in our choices as believers. I think about the words of Jesus, where I'll read from Mark's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 34. And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." So he's saying if you're going to be my follower, you have to deny yourself. What does that mean to deny yourself and have self-denial? One, it means that the Bible tells us again and again not to trust our own hearts, not to trust ourselves, not to trust our desires, but to subordinate them to what God wants. And to deny ourselves means to stop living only for ourselves. Selfish living is not the spiritual life. So we put ourselves aside, it says we put our desires aside. Instead of doing what I want and what I feel like, I'm going to begin living for the Lord. I'm going to say each day it doesn't matter so much what I want, what I feel like doing. I'm going to do what God tells me to do. Instead of living my life in a selfish way, I'm going to start living for how God in his word tells me to live and tells me how to act. He says, "For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." So that means we start living for the gospel. We start living for the kingdom. And then he says, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" So if we gain worldly success, riches, fame, comfort, what good is it if you lose your soul? Some versions say in the translation, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his self? Dishonoring yourself is one way that you lose yourself. One of the ways that you lose yourself by making moral compromises and indulging your flesh, indulging your selfish desires. That's a paradox that the Bible talks about. The people that are living like waking up saying, what's going to make me happy today? What's going to make me feel good? I'm going to go do that. It's selfish living, shallow living, chasing after temporary pleasures. Yet, it's saying when you put your selfishness aside and when you say, I want to go out there and do some good in the world, I want to live with a sense of purpose. I want to do something meaningful with my life. I want to help other people. I want to honor God. I want to live for the kingdom. I want to push my selfish desires aside. Well, it tells us and shows us time and time again that that's where happiness comes from. You see what I'm saying? Happiness doesn't come from chasing happiness. Happiness comes from living for the Lord and having a purpose, doing something good with your life, and helping other people. They say if you're feeling down or depressed, one of the best things to do is go help somebody less fortunate. Well, isn't that a selfish reason? Well, sure, you could argue that, but anybody here do something to help another person and you feel real happy and good about it? Or you volunteer and it makes you happy? Yeah, it does. I mean, if we're going to take it to the nth degree and the person's just, going to say like, well, what'll make me feel the most good this afternoon? I mean, perhaps to drink a lot or find some drugs and play video games might make you feel really good for the short term, but that doesn't make for a good and happy life. And it's like that with a lot of the pleasures we chase. Another thing the Bible tells us is keep your commitments. Jesus taught us all about honor, saying, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't be making promises and swearing to God about them. Just keep your word. Make your word mean something. That's where trust is built. If you say you're going to do something, do it. I remember it was a little bit unusual when I was between my freshman and sophomore year. During the summer, I went to a wrestling camp. And it was good, but those muscles that you use have been out of use just for a few months. And it's hard because if you're doing that for working out and drilling wrestling moves for 8+ hours a day, I've never been so sore in my life. But one thing that was good about it, it was at the local college, the junior college there. The coach that was running the program, it was after lunch every day. He took a little bit of time to talk to us about character traits and morality. I remember one thing he said is part of the thing about becoming a man is keeping your word. He talked about keeping your word, and he said, a lot of ways teenagers mess this up is you say somebody invites you to something and you say you're going to go to their barbecue, and then something better comes along, so you bail. Being a man and having honor is following through and doing what you say you'll do. See, I still remember that. Yeah, especially if you're around kids, around your kids, around your grandkids, you're working with kids, sometimes just taking a pause to tell them things like that. Maybe they've never thought of it before. Good thing to talk about it. And interesting how sometimes just giving a few words about that will stick with somebody. There was a poem here by an unknown author. It says, "So it's yours to use and cherish for as long as you may live. If you lose the watch he gave you, it can always be replaced. But a black mark on your name, son, can never be erased. It was clean the day you took it, and a worthy name to bear. When you got it from his father, there was no dishonor there. So make sure you guard it wisely after all is said and done. You'll be glad the name is spotless when you give it to your son." That's what it's talking about in the Proverbs here and that's why it's appropriate for New Year's. As we reflect on our lives, and anytime you're still alive, you're still building your life, your legacy, your reputation. What do you want to build this new year? What kind of name do you want to make for yourself? How do you, the older we get, we start thinking about how we would like to be remembered by our family and friends. They're going to remember your name, your reputation, how you treated them, how you made them feel. Well, good thing to think about as we reflect and have some goal making or some resolutions here. There is an excerpt from a book by Bill Gaither, the Christian musicians that have written a lot of songs, Bill and Gloria Gaither. But in his book, I Almost Missed the Sunset, Bill Gaither writes a story. He said, "Gloria and I had been married a couple of years. We were teaching school in Alexandria, Indiana, where I grew up, and we wanted a piece of land where we could build a house. I noticed the parcel south of town where cattle grazed, and I learned that it belonged to a 92-year-old retired banker named Mr. Yule. He owned a lot of land in the area, and word was that he would sell none of it. He gave the same speech to everyone who inquired. I promised the farmers they could use it for their cattle. Gloria and I visited him at the bank. Although he was retired, he spent a couple hours each morning in his office. He looked us over in the top of his bifocals. I introduced myself and told him we were interested in a piece of his land. Not selling, he said pleasantly, promised it to a farmer for grazing. I know, but we teach school here and thought maybe you'd be interested in selling it to someone planning to settle in the area. He pursed his lips and stared at me. What did you say your name was? Gaither. Bill Gaither. Any relation to Grover Gaither? Yes, sir, he was my granddad. Mr. Yule put down his paper and removed his glasses. Interesting. Grover Gaither was the best worker I ever had on my farm. A full day's work for a day's pay. So honest. What did you say you wanted? I told him again. Let me do some thinking on it, then come back and see me. I came back within the week, and Mr. Yule told me he had the property appraised. I held my breath. How does $3,800 sound? Would that be okay? If that was per acre, I would have to come up with nearly $60,000. $3,800, I replied? Yep, 15 acres for $3,800. I knew it had to be worth at least 3 times that. I readily accepted. Nearly 3 decades later, my son and I strolled that beautiful, lush property that had once been pasture land. Benji, I said, you've had this wonderful place to grow up through nothing that you've done, but because of the good name of a great-granddad you never met. What a legacy. What a legacy that is. And we've all had that by sometimes how we're treated by somebody does something nice for you because who your parents are. You know, Maybe they give you something for Christmas because they're your parents' friend or your grandparents. Well, all of us build that legacy. We have our first name that we want to honor God with, of our individual selves, and our collective name that live the right way, and your family will be blessed by it in many ways. Sense of honor, a good name, something that needs to be valued and needs to be said often.